Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much, CSUB, for hosting this event. And unless you're a kit fox living in a hole, you know who Lorelei Oviatt is. And I'm very excited to share the stage with Lorelei today to talk about the vision that Lorelei's had for a carbon management park in Kern County. So perhaps, Lorelei, we can just jump right in. And I'd love to know, first, what is this vision? And where did it come from? So maybe sort of set the stage a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And of course, we're going to be showing this interactive website. And it is because of James and his colleagues, Emily and others. And thank heavens we hired a science educator to do this, and we didn't try to do it ourselves. So the idea from this actually came from a referral from the Board of Supervisors. Many of you know that they are required to figure out what to do with the overdraft basin, called the Sustainable Groundwater Act. And one of the unfortunate things that's going to happen is that 500,000 acres of productive ag is going to have to stop growing things. And we're going to have 500,000 acres of land that has very little water. So PPIC, the Nature Conservancy, all of these groups have been trying to help facilitate a conversation about that. The board's directive was very clear. How do we monetize this? How do we help farmers and property owners monetize their land? As many of you know, large-scale solar is a possible use. I won't go into the details, but it does not pay full property taxes. So the idea of 500,000 acres of land suddenly coming off the tax rolls means that your libraries close, aging and adult services can't provide services. So this is along the lines of what George talked about and others, Susan. We can't create these new industries the way we did in the 40s and 50s. And so that gave me an idea. What if we localize and centralize these clean energy projects closer to potential CCS projects? We have 3 being permitted that are going through the EIR process. If they're all approved, some of them would be in this area. If they're not approved, others will come after them. At the end of the day, what if we use this land to help these clean energy companies with permitting, centralize them 8 or 9 miles away from people, and most importantly, we'd also have another 25 to 30,000 acres of solar to power them. That was the genesis. It has turned out far beyond my idea. This is the function of many, many, many people's experience, including the technical experts from the Department of Energy. So, James, are you going to walk through our park?
Sure. So what should be on the screens now is a website which is public. You can go to it, and this is what Lorelei and I presented to the Board of Supervisors earlier this week. And this website essentially walks you through a handful of industries that could be co-located in this carbon management business park. And so we can, if you want to click on, let's say, SDAC, for example. Sure. LDAC is fine. LDAC will very likely not be in Kern County for the water requirements, but SDAC, we'll look at that. Okay, let's scroll down. So essentially, with each of these technologies, one can learn about them through 4 different lenses: a technological lens, a societal lens, environmental lens, and economic lens. And so, if you're curious about what are these technologies, how big are they, what does an SDAC facility look like, how many acres does it take up, how tall is it, what does it sound like, what are some of the other impacts of having this in the landscape? This website will help you answer those questions. Now, a lot of these industries are very nascent, so there aren't very many examples of these working at sort of commercial scale or even pilot scale in a number of cases. And so, and that's, so where we don't know, we've also tried to make that clear on the website. In a couple of weeks, this website will have, you'll have the ability to download a report on the site, which is about 250 pages of information, which goes in, which does a deep dive into all of these technologies. And so you'll be able to actually see where all of this data comes from. Everything is cited back to the original sources. So, you know, that's essentially this page, this interactive map. And then if we go to the top, we also have a comparative analysis tab, actually further up to the top. We could click on that. And on this tab, you can actually compare the different technologies through different lenses. So in this case, we're looking at land use and cost to build for these 5 different technologies. And you can choose the different lenses on the side and see how these different industries compare. You can look at job creation, cost to capture the CO2, and other things, and compare them that way. And below, you have a little description of what you're actually looking at. And finally, we have a frequently asked questions tab. So to be very, very clear about this, this is not an actual project. This does... Lorelei, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, occasionally people have gotten confused and said, you know, how much is it going to cost the county to build this? Well, we're not building anything. This is a vision. This is intended to get people excited, attract investors, and help the people who own that 500,000 acres of land to figure out what to do with it. And we totally expect that this will be multiple parks. I mean, this is one large park, but this is multiple parks. In addition, when we applied for the DOE grant, I truly believe this is an example that can happen anywhere in the Central Valley, or happen in Texas, or happen in other places. You know, I forgot who said it, but these are not industries, I'll say it my way, these are not industries that work and play well in neighborhoods. We do not, you know, this is not going to happen in downtown LA, and it's not going to happen in downtown Bakersfield. We have to be more careful about where we put these. They're close enough to job centers, and we can arrange for transit, van pools, all sorts of things. But putting them next door to people is not a good thought for the future, and we must have these new kinds of industries for a variety of reasons.
So in this park concept, one of the main features is, of course, that you have central CO2 you have a central CO2 hub that is accepting the CO2 that's captured from all these sources that are co-located in the park and then taking it somewhere else. And that's going to require, you know, eventually, you know, transporting the CO2, et cetera, and we heard about that earlier today. You know, and I'm curious, Lorelei, as you think about what we need to do in order to make this concept a reality, how do you, yeah.
I think those are all interesting questions. So first of all, we have to get the carbon capture and sequestration areas through a public process, through an EIR. They all require conditional use permits. They'll all require their EPA injection wells. We need to get through that process. In addition, these industries need to look at the true bottom line of mitigation. I know we talk a lot about carbon dioxide. Here in Kern County, these projects will be required to mitigate all of their criteria pollutants as well, down to 0. Not, oh, well, I'm under the limit for the air district. Down to 0. We require it of our logistics, we require it of our other projects. This is a big concern for the communities. A lot of talk about CO2 and methane, but we just cannot continue with PM10, PM2.5, ROG and NOx, even in the service of CO2 removal. So the real question is, some of these projects need to go through permitting so that people can actually look at the economics in California. You may be able to do that in Texas, but California, we're not going to do it that way. So I think that what it's going to take is landowners are going to have to get together, decide if this is something they want to finance. They need to be in proximity to this. I'm already permitting 3,000 megawatts of solar right next door to where the CCS is. These are independent projects that we're already going through. It's actually 3,500 megawatts of solar. There's grid capacity issues, and they were worried, but now they're excited because they could use that solar for this. And then later, when the grid gets upgraded in 15 years, they could send that power outside of Kern County. So I think there's a lot of moving parts, but the first thing that always has to happen is the vision. And that's what CSUB is doing. That's what Kern Community College District is doing. That is what the state of California is doing, is creating the vision for people to then see where they fit.
So one of the things that your office also studied was the potential economic impact of having this and job creation possibilities. And could you tell us about what that study found?
Yes, so we work with an economist, Nadelson. He's done a number of economic studies for us on these new clean energy policies. We were very pleased to see at the top end, this could produce $68 million a year in property tax revenue to the county, $25 million to surrounding cities, and 23,000 jobs. At the low end, it's still exciting. At the low end, it's like $27,000 to the county and 12,000 jobs. That is hope. So if anything else, part of the reason for doing this is to provide us hope that we can see in partnership with our oil companies as they reinvent themselves, what does this future look like for Kern County and the 1 million people who live here?
So we want to think of your questions. We're going to turn over to questions shortly, but I did want to ask you, Lorelei, another question. So we have, there's some industries here, and in our process working with you, we looked at a larger list, of types of industries. And what generally would you say was sort of the framework applied to select the ones that we're seeing on the map?
So the first criteria is, what kind of water do you use? If you need high quality water like making chips, this Kern County is not the place for you. We don't have enough of that clean water that we can use. We're barely going to have enough water for the housing that we're going to need over the next generations. So number one, do you need high quality water? So if you do, you need to bring water treatment with you. So one of the things about this park is we have an R&D facility such that you could bring pilot projects, they could get a permit over the counter, and you could, as we like to say, fail fast and figure out what you need to do so that you can scale up. We have areas in here for water treatment because there is lots and lots and lots of degraded water that could be cleaned up. And so that is one of the criteria we looked at, is the amount of water, and then we asked the scientists, the DOE specialist, could this process use lesser quality water? And in some cases, they can't. It's just not feasible. Okay, well, that's probably not going to work for us, so I'm not going to get my hopes up. Direct air capture, on the other hand, is something that is a natural fit. This area, one of the biggest challenges with direct air capture is going to be noise. A lot of people don't know that we have one of the largest natural gas plants, maybe some people do, La Paloma, which is in the middle of the oil fields, which is very loud, but there's no one to hear it. So at the end of the day, this is a location that can actually absorb environmental impacts with appropriate mitigation. I think we also looked at things that normally don't happen in California. I mean, we are talking to some companies that want to recycle lithium batteries, and the real issue is can you do it so that it's safe? That's going to be a big stretch for California, but we're going to try. So those are some of the criteria.
I guess my last question, we have a lot of people here who are students or who are starting younger companies, new companies, or maybe more established companies in the audience that are trying to, investigate new processes and, do things that haven't been done before. And we've heard from some of these already today. What advice would you have for companies that, are looking to build something, so do something at a significant scale. It hasn't been done before. They want to do business in California. They want to set up shop here. Like, is there any sort of, anything you might say to that community listening?
I noticed you put that part in about do it in California, because I tell you to go someplace else, but that's okay. All right, you want to be in California, you have to have courage, lawyers, and lots of money and time.
There you go.
I will try to cut out the time, but you have to have courage. Okay? You have to be willing to engage in the public conversation that your project is going to be. And you have to be willing to admit, yes, I do have air impacts. Here's what I'm going to do about them. Many, many startups are used to raising money. And when you raise money, you always downplay those kinds of things. My staff and I call them the PR meetings, the public relation meetings. You want to have an effective meeting with my department, don't give us the PRs. We know. We'll go on your website. We'll look at it. You need to be honest with us. Okay? We will look at those environmental impacts in an environmental impact report, and you will pay to mitigate them. If you're not willing to do that, then Kern County is not the right place for you, and I doubt there's other counties that are in California. But be honest at the beginning. It will save you months and months and months of meetings where nothing happens. And then we can get to work. Now, the bottom line of this park concept is that they would permit not these specific projects, but these types of project with one specific plan once. So they would do it once. Here's how you do hydrogen. Here's how you do direct air capture. There would be an environmental impact report. You would get through that process, and then everybody who wanted to be in that park only would need a building permit, and then they would go through their 100 list of checks, and we would streamline the permitting. That is the only way we're going to get where George wants to go. We have got to streamline the permitting here in California without cutting corners. So if you drive up the Grapevine, how many people have driven up the Grapevine or out of the Grapevine to LA, and you maybe even stop to get your Starbucks at the Tejon Commerce Center? That is 15 million square feet of industrial, logistics, commercial. It was done with one EIR on each side of the road, went through its permitting, and now you can build millions of square feet of logistics with a 7-day permit, and they mitigated their air down to 0. And that's why they're successful now, because people from outside California, that's what they're looking for. And so we need to do the same thing to accelerate these solutions. Because leaving these startups to, I call it wander in the wilderness looking for a piece of property to locate on in California, it's just not the way that it's going to work. It's not going to work. So we want to help the workability. And these will all be public processes, and everyone will have a chance to weigh in, and we will figure out how to do it so that it's safe.
Thanks, Lorelei. I'd like to turn it over to questions, if anyone has any questions.
And yes, I do want it in 5 years.
Question, gentleman here. I think a microphone's coming.
I applaud the concept, long overdue, and the energy you're putting into it. My question is this: how does this differ from a programmatic EIR for an area?
So a program EIR doesn't get you an actual project. It's kind of like an overlay. A program EIR is up here, and then each individual project has to go through their own EIR, which takes another year, potential litigation, potential risk. So program EIRs are interesting for things like the general plan and other sorts of big problems, but they're not streamlined enough to get you to where we need to go.
Any other questions?
Is there a plan to allocate qualified opportunity zones for investors in this area?
I'm sorry, say it again? Say it again?
Yes, I will approach. Is there a plan to allocate opportunity zone for qualified opportunity zone for investors that are interested in this area?
So we're leaving that to the private sector in regards to investors, but I love the question. My number one goal in doing this interactive website was to send a message to Wall Street and send a message to all this green money back east. If you want to come to California, come to Kern County. Many of you don't know, and I appreciate some people do know. So we've permitted over 18,000 megawatts of solar and wind for California. That is enormous. It all took EIRs, but it represents 69, because there was just another financing, $1 billion of private money investment in Kern County. That's $69 billion over 15 years. That's what gave us the idea that we could do it again for clean energy. We have a track record, and we didn't even intend to invest that. We just kind of rolled along and it all happened, right? You know, in the permitting. This time we want to be strategic. So my answer would be, if you're interested in investing, there's many people in this room that have startups, there's companies here, go talk to them.
Other questions?
Okay.
All right, Lorelei, thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks. Good job.
I'd like to just make one announcement before we move on. There's a firm in Worcester, Mass. that is apparently sponsoring this event. No, they're not. There's a logo that's incorrect in our program. I'd just like to say thank you to Cornerstone Engineering here for sponsoring our event. Their logo is incorrectly indicated in our program. But thank you to Cornerstone for making this possible, along with all of our other sponsors today. Thank you.